guys. Well, long time no see. Yeah, it's fall, and that truck is still in the garage, barn, whatever this is. I think I started working on this truck 3 years ago. I think it was fall of 22 that I tore the old version apart. It might have been fall of 21. Anyway, it's still in the barn, and it's fall, so the RVs are put away, the pool's put away, the lawnmower's almost put away. All that summer stuff that takes all the time in the world is just about all put away, and it is time to get back to work on this truck. So I just spent a whole bunch of money on it, so let me show you. I'll spin you around. Let me show you what you're doing. So that right there and that right there is what we just spent a whole bunch of money on. Drive shafts. So recap, this truck got stretched. It's a lot longer than it used to be. Let's bring you guys out there. That's easier to see. So truck got stretched. Go back and watch some older videos. You'll see that process. I had the original drive shafts from this truck as I built it the last time around. It's a single cab, like 155-inch wheelbase or whatever it was, factory. And that was a custom drive shaft built by the same shop that built these. And it was using the 1610 joints and shaft diameter off of the original Ford F700 back to the 1410 setup for this Dana 80 that's stock into a GM C3500 HD. So we had an adapter shaft, a short adapter shaft that was only like 3 feet long, to a slip joint and a carrier bearing, and then back to our rear shaft, which was actually a stock shaft. That was a stock 3500 HD shaft. Fast forward, we built this truck, yada yada yada. I bought another set of stock 3500 HD shafts used. That is one of them. Bought it from a local guy here that I know, and was hoping I could just have the front shaft changed and we'd make it work. Problem was I wasn't thinking right, and that would involve 2 slip joints. We can't have that. So I resigned myself to spending a whole bunch of money. Shop called me though once they got into it and said, hey, we got a problem. All of these 1410 slip joints that I had in the old system, all that stuff is in LA. We can't get it. It's obsolete. It was unique apparently to the 3500 HD. Seems weird, but that's what he said. So he said, here's my solution. We're going to keep it a 2 shaft system, but we're going to go over length. We're going to be a little bit over 72 inches on both of them. I think this one's actually at or just under 72, but that front shaft is long. He goes, that way I can cut off the majority of your old yokes, put new joints in them, weld them onto new tubes, and bada bang, bada boom, we can make it work. So they worked their magic, and $1,900 later, we have 2 shafts. So I've got the front one bolted in, and we're working on driveline angle right now. And I suck at math, so you guys will probably tell me I'm wrong, but there's that beautiful, there's our 1610 joints on a really, really long, that's like 6.5 foot long shaft. And I've already got the truck set at ride height. It's air ride, so that's easy. Yes, you can hear an air leak. My tank drain valve is leaking. We need to spin that out and pipe dope it again. But I've already checked driveline angle on both of us. So I've checked the engine and the rear end. They are both at 6 degrees, which is where I set them. I know that's a lot, but that's because I already caused myself a huge amount of fabrication based on where I put this engine and transmission. I had to squat it down that much. In its previous iteration, it was probably at over 10 degrees, which was problematic. Yes, I know. So when I built the rear end like 2 years ago, I set that pinion angle accordingly. So that axle is set to 6 degrees, just like the engine and trans. So I've got this shaft bolted in up front on the trans, and I currently have it set, as you can see, to right about dead on, it's like 4, maybe 4 1/4 degrees. And just from looks, because what I want is I want a little bit of angle. I want that, we always want U-joints to be turning at a slight angle. And that way they get actually some lubrication. Otherwise the needle bearings don't spin much. The whole thing's kind of in perfect phase. So so we want, in order to create that, we know we're going to be a 0 degree system. We're going to be a net neutral system because our transmission and our axle line up. So I think if I set this at 4, I'm going to maybe give it another little half a pump on that jack. But we're going to set that at 4, and then it's time to build a carrier bearing bracket. And then it's as simple as bolting in the back. They've already put some paint marks on this for me so we can phase it all together, and we'll be cooking with gas. The problem is, as you can see from down here, where that carrier bearing is, I don't have a cross member. And it's right where I put my dang air tank. And that's all plumbed and bracketed and welded and painted and done. So I don't really want to mess with that. And building the bracket that would hang off the bottom of the frame would be in the way because of the shaft is tucked up tight. So I think I've come up with a new solution. I'll show you. And you might hate it, but that's okay. It's my truck, right? This piece of C-channel, structural C-channel, is going to be our solution. So I don't know if I can do this one-handed. But what we're going to do is we got a couple cross members here that we can span like that. And then we can build a bracket to come down off of that C-channel and support our carrier bearing at the right angle so we don't have tension on that mount, and we'll be in business. So I'm gonna get to work on that as usual. I'm probably gonna bring it back when it's like all or mostly done, and we'll show you what we got. Okay, so I've cut that piece of C-channel down to 42 inches, and here's the setup for the carrier bearing mount. So you can see I did a bunch of marking and fitting. We drilled that 3/16 bar at 6.5 inches on center for 3/8 hardware. And now I've got it set up. I'm just using a scrap piece of that 3-inch channel as a jig to make sure we weld it right. All right, so I've got my, whatever you want to call this, the cross member of the cross member. It's kind of like a bottom joist. Anyway, it's bolted in place temporarily. And I have my carrier bearing bracket slid into place as far as I can go. This air fitting is in the way. It won't be once I cut these excess down. So I got it close enough where it's just barely over the carrier bearing flange and I can mark it. So I just did that. So now I'm going to pull all this back off. Well, actually, I'm not going to pull all of it off. I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to cut it down. Then I'll slide that into place, and we will bolt it in place and tack it in for welding. We'll just tack it on the truck and then pull it off, full weld it, and then we're gonna shoot some paint and call it a night. Okay, well, there we go. She's painted. Bracketed. We got the right, you can see it better if I go. Can you see that? Anyway, I don't know if you can see that or not, but driveline angle's right. That shot gets a little better where you can see that we've got our 4 degree, sorry for the fingers.
You know, the finger.
Yes, I know the finger, Goose.
I'm sorry, I hate it when it does that. I'm sorry.
Finger start 4 degree pitch, which will then be another slight angle change for back to this. I did find that I had not torqued my pinion nut. I was all worried because I had all sorts of friggin' play in that thing. But that was just because I hadn't done my job. So those Dana 80 pinion nuts, they of course center the pinion bearing in the race. So that's why it was sloppy. But they take 470 foot-pounds. So I don't have a torque wrench that goes quite that high. So we just put a 5-foot bar on a 3/4 drive breaker bar and turned it as hard as we could against a chunk of wood, and she's nice and tight now. I have a feeling it's a shade over 470, but anyway. All right, time to throw the rear shaft in, and she done. All right, guys, well, it is the next day, and we are cooking with gas on this truck. Got a whole bunch done. I'll show you. So the drive shafts are in. I'm happy with them, I think. I mean, unless they vibrate like crazy, and then I won't be, but they're in, and everything's greased. Everything looks really good. I also dove in up here on some miscellaneous odds and ends, and I knew I needed some more parts for in order to finish. So one of those was power steering, because this is a swap using GM Hydro Boost. That's actually a Dodge. That's an air pump for a vacuum pump, I should say, which I'm not using. I'm just using it as a pass-through. That's why everything's capped off. But that's the drive for a Saginaw-style pump. This is what you basically have to do on a Cummins. I tried running the high-pressure pump that came on this and was in the F700. GM Hydro Boost did not like that. Was not cool. So anyway, so we've got all the factory lines all new on the Hydro Boost setup. That is happy with, this gearbox is happy with that, and all you have to do is you really have to either braze in a second return into that reservoir, or you have to have a T. So I've got this all prepped for a T, and as part of that T, I've got the lines that run out. I'm repurposing the cooler I had before because it wasn't that old, but that's our cooler. So waiting on that T, but otherwise that's all tightened down, new O-rings ready to go. Worked on coolant too. This is a hose I ordered because it had the right dimensions roughly, and the right end hose fitting sizes, and I got to cut that back just a hair more. I did have to modify it, but that's off a new Dodge 4500, 5500 with the Cummins. It actually came really, really close. So that works. Had to order another adapter for this lower hose, but that's coming too. Got clamps on everything else. Ran our heater hoses up. So all big important things. I'm now working on exhaust. I'm waiting on a V-band clamp. I thought I had it. I don't, so got to order that. But in the meantime, I just have a T-bolt kind of just holding that downpipe in place. If you watch some of the older videos, it took me like 3 iterations of trying to buy/build a downpipe until I found some random supply house online that had this downpipe off an F700 with a Cummins, and it has that. I think you'd call that a Cobra neck 90, and it fits perfect. I mean, it drops it right down where we need it to go. Runs at the right height. I've got just a simple. I think that's a. Was it an MBR? Yeah, I can't see it, but I think it's MBR. It's supposed to be a quiet tone. I don't like loud vehicles. As I found in my old age, I like the quieter the better. Get off my lawn. Lots of pipe and a half decent muffler should help with that. So right now what I'm doing is I am repurposing this. This is old exhaust off my school bus I bought for storage, and sold off the DT360 that was in it. Basically got me a storage unit across the street from my property. And it had nearly new 4-inch exhaust on it. So, and obviously it's a school bus, so nice long stretches of pipe. So I'm repurposing that. I've got everything jack standed and blocked into place. So now I can figure out exactly which band clamps I need. And what I'm going to jump into right now is, and I think we're going to do I don't know if this elbow is going to work. I've got half of an elbow. It's kind of got a nice little turn to it. I kind of like that little angle out. We might turn it down ever so slightly, kind of like that. I kind of dig that, and it's perfect. I cut this already, but it comes right down in front of our 4-link hangers, so we're not getting in the way of any of that back there. All right, next thing we're tackling, shifter. You can see when I built this, I heated it and bent it. I cut it to get it out because, yeah, we stripped this down in a hurry. That's ugly, but that is about the right angle. So, but now the engine trans is higher than it used to be. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of all this nasty bent stuff. And the length would be perfect if I cut it right there before we get to that. Then I can clean up that weld. I can bevel everything properly, weld everything properly, and give it a shot coat of black paint. And we're back in business. So we got a shifter, so we'll get after that. Okay, well, here we are inside the truck. Yeah, that's hooked up and tight. Look what we got here. So, I'll show you. I've got the clutch pulled back with a cable right now. So there's reverse. Oh man, she's nice and tight.
It's too tight. Too tight? You could land a jumbo fucking jet in there.
It's another weekend. I got some parts in. So I'm gonna show you what's in progress, what's still to go. There's a lot left. So, coolant lines, we're doing well on. Heater hoses are loomed. I am gonna have to probably cut back into those, but whatever. Lower rad hose is done. This flex line I got just wasn't quite right, and it was technically a 1/4 inch too big. You know, we got small necks on the Chevy rad and bigger on the 5.9, so ended up buying an actual real aluminum coupler and then downsized to some hose, some brand new hose I had. Bada bang, bada boom. Really did the same thing with the upper. So this is that upper hose off of a newer Cummins 6.7. So what we did was we just cut her down where we needed to, and then we'll slip the old protective loom back over just as a, you know, I don't know that I can do it one hand. There we go. Kind of hides the coupler a little bit. So we got an upper rad hose. All of our other coolant lines are all clamped in place now. Power steering is all done, so we've got the return coming down here to a T that runs up to our power steering cooler, and then it comes back to the return on the pump. And we got pressure coming up to the hydro boost and pressure going back to the steering gear. So everything's tightened down, new seals. That should be good to go. In retrospect, I could have probably just used this internal cooler I have. That's meant to be a transmission cooler. Whatever. It's gonna do better being like that. So that's done. Exhaust. Well, exhaust still isn't done because on my third clamp, ordered a 3-inch V-band for the turbo outlet. It's not 3-inch, it's 2 3/4. Got another one coming. But otherwise, the exhaust is all clamped together. And hung. We got a little turnout there. We've got all of our hangers. So she's good to go minus that V-band clamp. So we got exhaust, we got a coolant system. By the way, I fixed the one air leak on the drain valve on the tank. This truck's been sitting here for a week, and she's still got plenty of air in the system. So that's awesome. No leaks. I mean, it's a very simple system. There shouldn't be any, and it's all brand new. Anyway, so what's left to do? We still got to play with this alternator and then figure out a belt. This is the bracket I had welded before, and yeah, that's not gonna work. So I'm trying to get away from the Chevy one-wire alternator. I don't even know how we're gonna excite this. That's gonna get into some electrical crap that I'm probably not smart enough to do, but we'll figure it out, right?
It's really beyond words. It's really incalculable.
But anyway, this was a higher amperage alternator, so it's meant to work with the old Cummins setup here. So we'll figure out how to excite it and make it work. I have the inlet off, the intake horn off. because I thought I was going to move it. I no longer think I do, or I am. So this is we are going to a water-to-air intercooler system. This allows me to mount this up. I have this off so I can start building brackets for the mounts, but this allows me to mount it kind of over top of the engine. Well, it's another weekend and I'm back at it. Really, really wanting to work on this intercooler. I've tried that's a heavy sucker. Oh, there she is. I've scratched it up already because apparently that's what I do. Tried some different locations. Was going to tuck it right there, laying flat, and man, it's just not good mounting options, to be honest. And it's right over the turbo, so gonna heat soak. So I decided to go out to my old school bus and get my inner fenders. Now these are inner fenders from a regular GMT 400, so a half ton through 1 ton, and this being the GMT 455 is basically has a 4-inch body lift is one of the primary differences. Those inner fenders are no longer available for GMT 455s. Can't get them. So these are regular inner fenders from a smaller truck, and I've read some stuff that they basically fit. I can't tell the differences, but it does bolt up. I don't know if it's going to sit right here, and I can tell you that I had to do some trimming to clear my radiator hose. I have to do just a little more right there. I got to get a little more off of there. It's too close. But anyway, and that's okay because we got to paint these still. That's just an E-coat. So, oh, there. Wow, I really got my angle not right there. Should have probably looked under here first. That's okay. You don't need to worry about things looking professional. But anyway, they bolt up here. Obviously these cab mounts, everything bolts up. So we'll find out. We'll have to test fit the fenders and see how that all plays. But regardless, my thought is that we had 2 locations, both here and over there, that were factory battery trays. I've relocated my batteries back to a battery box on the frame rail, so I've got all that space. So I'm thinking that one of these 2 locations might just be prime. We do have a fender on. I mean, it's just test fit. And those inner fenders, I think, are regular old GMT 400 units. They seem to line right up with everything. So anyway, I put that side on and then decided I wasn't going to put it over there. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this, I've got the coolant overflow, which is cracked, and it's ugly, so I ordered a new one. But that's about where it goes. My block of wood's in the way, but I think this is where it's going to go. Nothing else needs to go. The other thing that's going on is I got some parts that came today. As I said, I was waiting on, so I was able to redo this fitting. Instead of that coolant temp sensor pointing up, it now points forward, and we still, we moved back about about maybe 3/8 of an inch, but so that hose is cocked a little bit, but it still fits just fine. And I think it's damn close. But I think it's going to clear the hood now. Spacer came for the intake horn. I do still have to I got to get 2 new bolts. The long bolts, where the long bolts work in the short bolt hole, but I got to get longer ones to go in between. But that's a nice looking little machined aluminum piece. We've got some bolts. We've got this. This is just hanging here. It's in the way. We've got this 3-inch 45. I'm waiting on a 3.5 to 3-inch 45 that'll go right here. And then I think we'll get real lucky on just a piece of straight aluminum pipe going in here. I'm going to play with elevation, basically, of where this thing sits. But I spun the outlet 90 on the turbo, and I did have to cut down a piece of my aluminum tubing, but basically that works pretty nice right there. And so I just want to make sure that this piece works before I get to fabricating mounts. So I think we'll do that next week. It's going to be too late today by the time I get that last fitting. That's okay. And then we can also then, once we know that it all fits, we can finalize modifying that bracket for the alternator. So, and then I think it's going to work okay. I'm going to have to probably get a different air cleaner. This one's really old and used anyway, but, you know, it's not going to fit. It's too tall. But I think we can, we're either going to leave it at an angle like that, or we can rotate that also to be straight up. That gets it a little close to the exhaust manifold. All depends on where exactly that line sits. But anyway, now I knocked it off the turbo. Regardless, we've got some options. Probably going to replace that. Need to get a new 4-inch air filter. So, yeah, and again, I know that air filter sitting right next to the turbo is what it is. I know there's heat soak. I know. This is not some 800 horsepower pulling truck. All right, guys. Well, this clutch is going to be the death of me. So I'm going to backtrack and explain my thought process here. In the original build, when I built this truck 12 years ago, as you push the clutch, it had an arm. There's the clutch pedal right here. Easier to visualize. So as the clutch got pushed, this arm rotated up, which lifted a rod. That rod, as it was in the F700 originally, went through the floor right about there. And I had I did things a lot differently 12 years ago. It was my first real truck build, and I was also under the gun and didn't have much of a budget, so we made shit work. Anyway, I mangled a hole in the floor of the truck, found a little boot that fit it, and there was just a clutch rod that went through. So that rod lifted, and it rotated on a mechanism, a push-pull mechanism, lifted up on that, which in turn moved the linkage that was inside the frame rail down to the transmission. This was the push-pull mechanism. So I didn't want that rod going through the floor again. So I backtracked and said I bought a PTO cable. I said a PTO cable ought to be strong enough to work as a clutch cable. It was problematic. I was worried that the Heim joints on the ends weren't going to be strong enough. We had problems with the push-pull action, which direction we were going, and I'm like, ugh, I don't know. Fast forward, I have struggled with this clutch. I've put it off. I've screwed with it. Here's where I'm at. I've got this push-pull mechanism kind of rigged up, and I think this is going to work. I have to lengthen this arm. We're going to find a way to do that. But you can see what's going to happen is if I can find a way to mount this, whether it's to the firewall or off of the frame, we're going to put a little Heim joint on the end of the, a rod essentially on the end of that pedal. This would be the factory location where the hydraulic clutch would bolt and go through. So we can drill that out, and then we've got a nice location that we can put a grommet or a boot on, and we can have a clutch rod that comes out here. It's not in the perfect spot, but generally we can extend this arm up, and that rod can act on that arm. It's going to push on it, which is going to rotate it this way, which is going to push that rod in, which is the direction I need it to go. And our linkage is all going to be here, rather than this convoluted cable going to going to a rod. Too much. This is simple leverage, simple linkage, and it works. Okay, so the first thing is I lengthen this arm. I believe that's cast, so I wasn't going to try to weld it. So we just took a piece of 1x, it's probably 3/16. I don't know if that's quarter or 3/16. Either way, it's enough. Now I've marked out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely cut away both of these arms. Here's what that arm's going to look like. It's 2 inches wide where it's going to weld onto that pin. Narrows down to 1 inch just like the other arms. And we've got exactly a 6 3/4 inch spread just like the other arms. So they're equal length arms, so equal travel. And then we're we're gonna cut it like just at an angle like that. So unfortunately, I don't have a bandsaw, so that's what we're gonna use, and I'm gonna get to it. All right, well, a little bit of fabrication later, and there's our push-pull assembly. So you can see, welded on our new arm there. There's our center hole we drilled. So now we got to go fit it back in place on the truck and start figuring out some sort of mounting. I think first I'm going to make a template for the bracket that's going to sit on the firewall, and we got to build that, and then we'll build the bracket for this off of it, if that makes sense. Okay, so I've cut my 3/16 flat stock. It's like 2-inch bar, should work out pretty well. So I've cut it and beveled both sides and clamped it to my little makeshift tiny little welding table here, and I'll stitch her up. Okay, well, there is everything welded to the plate. I ended up, you can see that weld right there. I did extend that bracket up. There's a feature line on the cab, and I extended just under that so it fits flat. But because this plate sat quite a bit higher than how this plate extended, I wanted to get as far as I could, basically. So anyway, we are, I did invert. This is no longer lined up perfectly because I inverted this, this shaft in order to push the whole assembly this way in order to clear the inner fender. So now is the point where we test and see if this whole thing can get on. There's a brake line that's kind of in the way, and I don't know how that's all gonna go, but we're gonna see. Okay, well, before I hook the rod up, this is all just sitting in place, but you can see now what we've got going. This is greasable. I did screw up and the Zerk is pointed down slightly, but it's fine. We can still get on. I don't have it bolted on to the firewall yet. I do think I'm gonna end up adding a couple bolts. We don't need much, just like a 5/16 or a quarter even, because it's gonna be sandwiched to that firewall. But I think more than just, I've got 2 1/4-inch, well, they're not quarter, they're gonna be metric, but I've got 2 studs right now. That's just not enough. I'd like to see probably 2 more to spread that load on that plate. But you can see the heim joint rod down there, but you can see what's going to happen is so this one's going to, I do have to modify this to just where I had to mount this to clear that steering shaft and to clear the inner fender more than anything. This arm is longer than it needs to be. It's not really hurting anything per se, but the heim joint coming through that hole is not going to line up. It's going to be about 1.5 inches lower. So anyway, I'm going to get that, obviously I'm going to drill that out and get that rod through and then mark it and determine where I cut it. Also, the direction that I'm going, the spring that was factory off the F700 with this mechanism, it tensions in the wrong direction, and the 2 tabs are different, so you can't flip it and make it work. So that will not be, I mean, ultimately the clutch holds some return pressure, but all we're gonna do is we want it held in this position. This is clutch disengaged, that's at rest, clutch engaged. So basically we need to pull this arm that way. So that'll be easy. We can put some sort of we can put a spring there. Ultimately, way simpler. We're gonna end up with 2 rods. This is a very simple kind of standard clutch linkage, and it's intensely stronger than what this PTO cable would have been. So I wasted my money, but those 1/4-inch studs on a PTO cable, it's just not what that's meant to do. The action on a PTO is it's like 1 inch or 2, and it's a simple click in that doesn't have the resistance of a big old 14-inch clutch. So there's a reason all this hardware, stock hardware, is so beefy, and this is much stronger. I'm so much happier with this, and it kind of looks factory. Like, I had to put my brain to work a little bit, but we made this work, and I'm really, really super happy with it. So, and it's actually serviceable. You can actually undo that and pull it right out. There's room. You don't have to, like, it's not bolted in place and welded in place, and you can't get to it. So, I'm pretty happy, and I'm pretty glad that I finally tackled this. Okay, well, we disassembled everything and got a little primer going on. Let that dry for a bit, and shoot some black. Now, I know I still got to drill a hole in that one. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I want to get this paint on and set, so in a week when I'm back working here again, I can reassemble and do the final bit of fitting. I mean, I've gone on and on and on. We've tackled all kinds of different little projects, and I'll bring you back next time when we're working on fenders and paint, and we'll have all this stuff that we worked on finalized. I've got a throttle cable to do. Probably do that off camera. I don't know. But next step after that is we're getting into putting coolant in her and painting some fenders up and maybe starting it and seeing if it does what it's supposed to. Thanks, guys, for watching. Have a good week, y'all.